Welcome. I'm Dr. Liza Long, and in this presentation for English 101, we are going to talk more about the ways that artificial intelligence tools can be used to assist you in becoming a better academic writer. Let's get started with a writing prompt that's designed to help you prepare for your first writing assignment in the class, the literacy narrative essay. If we were in class together, I would give you time right now to write your responses to these questions as a sort of pre-writing exercise for your first essay. So I would recommend maybe hitting pause on the PowerPoint and taking a few minutes just to think about your personal experiences with writing and reading. Do you like to write? If you do, why? If not, why not? Do you think writing is an important skill? I'm very interested in your response to that question. Finally, what kinds of things do you read? Do you like to read? Why or why not? This will become part of your first My Essay feedback assignment, which will be a 2-page rough draft for our first essay assignment. I'll present more on that in a separate PowerPoint. If we were in class together, we would take some time now to discuss what you already know about artificial intelligence. Maybe you're already using it in your workplace or even in your daily life. And I'd love to know more about what excites you and how you've been using these tools if you've been using them. Most of my students at this point at least have tried out ChatGPT. So when we come together as a class, we will be discussing this. Come to class prepared to talk a little bit about your experiences with AI. Keep in mind that in my class, you are not going to get into trouble for using artificial intelligence. Instead, if I find that your use of AI is harming your learning or your development of your writing process, which is still important, you and I will just have a conversation about ways that you can more ethically use these tools. And part of my goal in this presentation is to share with you some ways that we will be exploring AI in academic writing. So I always like to start with CWI's academic integrity policy. And you'll notice in the highlighted part that submission of work created by artificial intelligence tools as one's own work is considered to be a violation of the academic integrity policy. However, we are going to incorporate AI into our writing process in this class. So how do we get around that? Well, I'm going to teach you how to acknowledge and cite your use, just like you would with any source. You can't copy and paste work from a source you find online and represent it as your own. And similarly, you should not copy and paste work that's created by ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini and represent that as your own work. However, I am personally what I now call a cyborg writer, which means that a lot of my writing process is integrated with artificial intelligence. So let's think about some ways that you can use AI in this class. I've listed a lot of potential ways throughout the writing process that you can use AI. What I'd like you to think about is whether you should use AI for these processes. I personally find that brainstorming is a great use of AI, but I'll put an asterisk next to that for you to think about. It's useful as long as you are still in charge and you are still deciding what you're most interested in. Keep in mind that you never want to use AI to replace you, the human in the loop. One of my favorite professors, Ethan Mollick from Wharton School of Business, has written a wonderful book. It's short, called Co-Intelligence. I always recommend that book to people. It really walks you through how to make sure that you're using AI in productive and helpful ways instead of harmful ways. So I do think brainstorming can be a particularly fun use of generative AI. That's what the generative part means, is that it's making things up, right? And sometimes it will have new ideas or new takes on a topic that's familiar. Another way you can use AI is to research and take notes. For example, I am using a transcription software right now that is transcribing what I'm saying. And similarly, if you have access to a transcription software and want to use that in class, I am more than open to that. Feel free to use transcription software like Otter AI, even talk to text on your phone will do this. If you struggle with writing, I think this can also be a helpful way to generate ideas using talk to text like the app on your phone. You can also use AI for research. We'll talk a little bit more in the class when we get to where we're learning about finding sources, about a tool called Perplexity AI. Now, the huge asterisk next to research is that AI makes stuff up. It makes sources up. One of the easiest ways for your professors to know if you have used AI unethically to write an entire paper is that your sources will be fake. And I discovered this early on. I co-wrote a textbook with AI. I would ask it to give me sources and it would give me completely plausible sounding sources, but when I tried to find those actual articles, it just made things up. Similarly, even today, one of my favorite tools, Claude.ai, I was having it review a paper I wrote for my own graduate school class, and it made up quotes from a very famous author, Bell Hooks. It was easy for me to verify that these notes were made up. So be very careful when you're using AI for research. Similarly, that asterisk applies to the next point, analyze and synthesize research and personal observations. One thing I have learned through my own personal experiences with AI is that I never want AI to write a summary of an article before I have read the article and had a chance to make my own personal observations on that article. This is because, again, it makes things up. And so if I deny myself with my knowledge, my curiosity, my questions, that first look at an article, if I have AI take that first look instead, it could skew my understanding of the article, especially if the AI's understanding is inaccurate. However, using AI synthesized research and personal observations in conjunction with my own work, I find is an excellent check on my work. So if I'm not completely sure I'm understanding something and I try to work through it myself, and then I ask AI for AI to evaluate and synthesize, this can help me to understand the work that I'm doing. And I think this is a very useful way to bring AI into all of your studying in college. Don't let it replace you. Again, always give yourself that first opportunity to read and write your summaries, but then circle back and use the AI as an additional tool to help you understand what you've read more robustly. And remember, you can push back. The fourth point here is to write a coherent essay based on notes. AI can do this. I have used it to do this, and this might sound shocking. It's not technically prohibited in my class as long as you are very transparent about your process. However, you should keep in mind that since a lot of my grading depends on your personal viewpoint and how you are understanding things, if I'm not seeing that reflected in an AI generated essay, that's going to hurt your grade. So ultimately, when I grade, you're responsible for what you turn in. As an example, with our literacy narrative, I'm really focusing on you, the human in the loop. And so if I'm seeing a completely AI generated essay, that's not really going to fit my rubric very well. So it could be a perfectly coherent essay, but it might still earn a very low score, right? Make sure you check in with me anytime you have questions. Again, you're not going to get in trouble for using AI in this class. You just need to show me what you're doing. So if I find that there's a problem with something, I can redirect and help you to use it in a more appropriate way. Now, this next point, we are going to use AI a lot in the class to get feedback, but keep in mind again, that just like with peer feedback, you might not always accept everything a peer said. We'll also be pushing back on artificial intelligence. So you get to decide if that feedback is useful, relevant, or helpful. And finally, this last point, I was sitting in a graduate school class on teaching grammar last semester, and everyone was going around the room talking about their grammar issues and how they help students work through things. And by the way, grammar is my superpower. I'm very good at grammar. So anytime you have a question about a grammar rule, I would love to talk about that with you. However, when the teacher got to me and asked how I handled this in the classroom, I said, "Oh, my students don't really have a problem with grammar." And everyone was shocked. And they said, "How? Why? What do you do?" I said, "Well, I asked them to use Grammarly or ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or another tool to revise and copy edit their work for grammar and syntax errors." I personally think this is a great leveler. I have seen teaching with these tools going on 4 semesters now, that students who have really great ideas but maybe didn't have the most perfect grammar now have a way to get those ideas into the mainstream. You know, we can be a little judgy about grammar. I'll admit it. I'll admit it myself, right? Maybe you've had that teacher in the past who graded grammar heavily. So that just kind of levels the playing field for those of us who don't really understand how to use the subjunctive or what a comma splice run-on is, right? AI can help you with that. And I will expect you actually to use, at a minimum, the Copilot checker in Word or the Gemini checker in Google Docs, if that's what you're using. So at a minimum, or Grammarly, if you have that access to Grammarly. At a minimum, I will expect you to be doing that. These are tools that are free and widely available, and we should be taking advantage of them at this point. So the right answer is, how can you use AI? You could use AI for any of these things, but other than copy editing, it could be problematic depending on how much you rely on AI. So you have to decide for yourself where AI can help you and where it might actually hinder you. All right, well, what do we even mean by AI? I'm assuming at this point, most of you, if not all of you, have tried ChatGPT. There is a free version. 4Open is a very robust tool. I'm personally a super user, so I have a professional account. I do not expect you to have a professional account in this class, but I've created custom GPTs. We might use some of them later in the class. Like I have one that helps with APA style. Microsoft Copilot is one that I always recommend to students because it's available for free with your CWI student email account, and Copilot is built on the most robust OpenAI ChatGPT models, and it also incorporates image generation, which we might use in the class once in a while. It can be fun. If you take my English 102 class, we do use image generation for some of our tasks. Google Gemini, I really like Gemini. I also have a paid account with Gemini. Many of you use Google Docs. I'm certainly a Google Docs user, and I've had access to the Help Me Write tool in Google Docs since I think spring of 2023. So I've had it for a very long time. You should all be seeing that at this point. Again, use that with caution, right? Like, do you want Gemini to help you write, or do you want it to be your own stuff? And a lot of that will depend on the assignment and what you're doing. Claude AI is my personal favorite. I also have a paid account to Claude AI. Like, I can't afford anything else in my life, but I can afford all these custom LLM tools. Claude's a great writer, and I really just like the way Claude works. Many of you have used Quillbot in the past. Grammarly AI has been around for a while. Quillbot's been around for a while. Grammarly has been around for a while. I often hear from students that they're not using AI, they're just using Grammarly. I just want to make sure you're aware that the pro version of Grammarly is basically ChatGPT 4Open. It uses what we call an API callout to ChatGPT. So there's no real functional difference between the responses you're getting in Grammarly's pro version and what you would get from ChatGPT. You are using AI, just keep that in mind. I'm increasingly turning to Meta AI because it's free and open source. I'm intrigued by that model. And DeepSeek AI, you've probably seen in the news, it's just blown up this past week. This is how fast AI moves. DeepSeek AI has a lot of promise as an LLM. However, all of these tools have privacy concerns, and certainly DeepSeek, because it's a Chinese company, you'll want to consider what kinds of data. That's true for all of these tools, though. You'll want to think about what kinds of data you're sharing. So let's talk briefly about prompting. When you might have heard about prompting before, this is a new skill. I often quote Andrej Karpathy, who is one of the founders of OpenAI. He said that English is the hottest new programming language. You are an English class. If you are an English speaker or any language speaker, really, prompt engineering is a new skill. And people who are good at it are finding some very well compensated jobs. So as you're playing around with this, if you've tried an AI tool and it hasn't been helpful, a lot of that might have been how you were interacting, how you were prompting it. I recommend that you give the chatbot a clear role, a task, a style, and a context. So explain exactly what you're looking for. And this example from my colleague Joel Glad is in our Write What Matters textbook. You'll be reading through that. I think it's a good example. All right, I've kind of hinted at this throughout. My expectation in the class is that you will acknowledge and cite all your AI use. And again, I'm not doing that to get you in trouble. Like, a lot of us maybe have been using AI and hiding our use because we don't want to get caught or get in trouble. This is not that class. I'm actually one of 2 artificial intelligence fellows for the state of Idaho. I do educating around the country. I've been to the OpenAI Educators Forum. You have a real resource in me in helping you to understand best practices in using AI, but I can only help you if you're showing me what you are doing. So my expectation in the class is that you will share any AI work that you do. Now, if you don't want to touch an AI tool outside of our My Essay Feedback, you don't have to. I can see all the work you're doing in My Essay Feedback within our LMS, so I can provide you with that feedback on your prompting right there. But if you are using ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, and I do expect that you'll share either screenshots or you'll copy and paste a transcript of your chats, just so I can see how you're using the tool and make sure that you're not harming yourself. That's an APA style reference. APA and MLA have very different rules about how they cite. We're an APA style class. I choose APA in our class. It may be new to you, don't panic, but I choose it because 80% of you will use this in your major. So I want you to get in the habit of using APA right from the start in your college writing class. All right, I feel like it's always critical to discuss ethics concerns whenever we talk about AI. This is a list that ChatGPT generated for me in July of 2023, so a year and a half ago. And these continue to be concerns. Misinformation, we've already talked about. Bias training data, we haven't, but we will learn more about it in our AI and ethics unit. Privacy and data security, I also briefly mentioned. Lack of accountability for harm. So if generative AI makes something up and it hurts someone, who is accountable for that? It's hard for us to know. Consent and user awareness. Do you even know when AI is tracking you or being used? Job displacement. This is a big one. We're going to be seeing more and more of this. And it's especially true for the formerly safe fields like writing, my own field, or computer science. These were highly valued skills, and I would argue they still are highly valued skills, but they're very different skills than they were even a year or two ago, and that can be challenging. There are mental health concerns, but also mental health hopes for interacting with AI, and we'll just be watching that. I think I do a lot of mental health advocacy, so I'm particularly interested in that point. And then finally, a reduction of human skills. I don't know how I feel about this, to be honest. Maybe. But the last point here, ChatGPT didn't mention, and you might have heard of it. My number one concern when I first started playing with these tools in 2022 and 2023 was climate change. And this is because I already knew a little bit about Bitcoin, I knew about NFTs, and I knew about the energy use that those types of tools, blockchain, NFTs, were taking. And I also knew a little about how LLMs were working. They're very probabilistic. They rely on trillion point data sets. I thought that's gonna take a lot of energy. And I was right, it does take a lot of energy. However, when I asked ChatGPT in 2023, it kindly told me that AI would solve that, and I snorted and laughed. But we're actually seeing some creative solutions come out of generative AI to the problem of climate change. So while that used to be my biggest concern, it's not my biggest concern anymore. My biggest concern is shifting back toward bias training data and privacy and data security. We'll keep seeing how that all plays out. All right, finally, I've mentioned My Essay Feedback a few times, and full disclosure, I have been working with the developer for this tool. I'm not paid to work with the developer, but I've been a consultant on this tool for the past several semesters. So I've had a chance to really help shape how this tool is created, how it's used for students. And if there's something you notice that you think would make the tool better, I would appreciate you telling me, because again, the developer is a good friend of mine. I can talk to him and we could maybe even get it incorporated into the tool. I really like this tool for a lot of reasons. First of all, I just think it's really simple. Secondly, it does exactly what I want it to do. It just uses a built-in AI to review your stuff based on, right now, my prompts. Towards the end of the class, I might have you create a class-created prompt so we can practice prompting. But it's right in our LMS. You don't have to go to the website. You'll just click on the assignment link. The assignment links are all under assignments. So there's a link in each weekly module that takes you to the assignments page for the My Essay Feedback ones. You need to find the week that you're doing. This week we're doing the literacy narrative rough draft. And you kind of started that at the beginning of this presentation, especially if you hit pause. If we'd been in class together, you would have started it. So go ahead and use that. And it will be auto-graded for completion. I do come in and check on these though. So you'll see instructor feedback, but the one thing I like is that your grade will be there instantly. So you kind of get a feel for it. It's graded for completion. You did it, you got it. Another thing I really like is we can build in peer review. So having the chance to see what your peers are doing, I think is really helpful when we're all learning and writing. But keep that in mind that our writing will be semi-public within the class, right? So as you're thinking about what to share, I think when you're writing for your peers, you tend to do a better job because you want to engage your peers and make it interesting for them. Finally, this might feel a little strange if you've never done it. I require students to evaluate the AI's feedback. So you'll submit your paper, the AI is going to give you some feedback. And what I've found in the past is about 95% of the time, it's pretty darn good. And about 5% of the time, it is completely off the rails. If you see that, that's another reason I check in on it. So I want you to get in the habit of always evaluating any AI feedback or any AI information. And this class will give you a good chance to do that. Keep in mind again that AI isn't always true, right? It doesn't always give us correct answers. So I'll be looking for that brief feedback that's part of your completion. The hardest part for students about figuring this out the first time is this source of essay prompt. So how do you submit it? You need to look at source of essay, choose the source of essay, click on that. You can either attach a file document or you can open up a text box and copy and paste in. I do not care which version you use, whatever's easier for you, except on your final drafts, where I would like you to use the APA template because I might have it evaluate your APA style. So this is how you submit. Choose the source of the essay. It's either a file attachment or you'll copy and paste into a text box, just like you might in Blackboard. And then you'll just submit it and you'll be amazed at how fast you'll get feedback on your paper. It's supposed to be constructive and developmental for this first one. So it should, if you're still working on some things, it should, highlight things that are interesting and suggest some ways to improve that. All right. You will probably have questions, and we are going to circle back to this in week 3 when we're all together. But I think this will be enough information, and sometimes just trying something can help you to come up with questions. You may not even know what questions you have until you try it. So we're going to try it this week. I did push the due date back from Sunday, which is the due date on your syllabus, to Wednesday before class. There's really no reason that we need to have these writing tasks done until before class. So that just gives you a few extra days. Please reach out if you have any questions. I have rescheduled office hours on Thursday of this week instead of our usual Wednesday, and I'm always happy to help. Emailing me is a great way to get in touch as well. All right, have a great week, and I will really look forward to seeing you all in week 3.